Alright guys, you finally got your box. You have to put it together. Here is the tutorial for you. The tools. It's going to be quite easy. You just need those 4X drivers. Now the fun part, the unpacking. Now while I'm taking all these things outside the box, I'll just comment on certain precautions you'll have to take while putting it together. First off, the enclosure is made out of resin. Resin is a material that is beautiful, but it's also very porous and can be prone to breakage if too much tension is applied to it. The white resin is also very, very sensible to UV light, and it will yellow very, very quickly. You need to find a way to get it off sunlight or any UV light source. Okay, so it's really important. Now, I'm getting all that stuff out of the box. You saw the first flat cable. This is for the floppy drive. There's another one. That's the one. The second one is for the SD card. So all these pieces, if they're put in the sunlight or close to a UV source, will yellow really quickly. And I'm talking about months, not years like Commodore 64 or anything like this. So be very, very cautious. The black one, of course, doesn't have any problem with it. So this is the SD card flat cable. This is the support bar to put the floppy on. We'll see how it goes later. This is the bumpers for the underneath plus the screws. I separated the screws, the main screws, from the side panel screws, which are in different bag. This is the Pico. Of course, this video applies for the basic model, which is, if somebody wants to put a normal power supply, like a big power supply, then it's going to be a bit different, but I'm sure you'll figure it out. That was the floppy. So these are the other screws that I was talking about. These are for the side panels. The floppy, this is for the cube. Those pillars, they have small differences from each other. So this one is the back left one for the power connector. So that's why there's a notch on the side. Here is the speaker assembly for the front. Not very complicated. You'll have to do a little bit of connecting. Don't worry, it should be really, really simple to put together. It's not very difficult. So this is the middle support piece that if people want to put it in full ATX, they can. The fan is, I opted to use this in most cases where you'll have the big fan in the middle of the unit to move air around. If you have a 68040, by default, this is what you're going to get. If you get a 060, you'll have a local fan on the CPU. You see all those force inserts. You could put one on if you want. It's just that I didn't want to put two, so only one will do. I'll come back to it later. This is the joystick subassembly. You have to be careful when you remove it to not bend the pins. I had to unscrew it so it would not. I would have a little bit more space to put more stuff in the box. Finally, the side panels. Fundamentally, when you receive the board, the base is supposed to work, so it's a simple assembly to put everything together. Now, the joystick bezel. The joystick bezel from the get-go is an assembly that is pretty big, but at the beginning it's being held by only 2 screws. So be careful to not, smash it, or because it's only held by 2 inserts in the plastic base, and actually it's going to become more solid when the screws are actually screwed, because the inserts open up when something is screwed inside. But since it's so big, and there's a very little support early on, it needs to be taken care of, and make sure that you don't bend the pin of the DB9s, the joysticks as well. So this is really straightforward. There's nothing much to do here. Just screwing the screws and then the flat cable. So before we get there, I'll start talking about it. when you install the flat cable, just make sure that the little black thingy, I don't know, how should I call it, the little black thingy is open clearly, and you feel that the flat cable just went down the slit, and then you just push back, and always make sure that it's straight. And then when it's done, try to pull it off the connector, and you see where the blue tabs are. It's really important to have the same kind of installation. So now the hard drive. The hard drive is the part where you will need to fiddle a little bit, because it's sandwiched between the CPU module and the side of the joystick bezel. It's held there with two screws, which are two M3 screws. There's only two in the bag, so it should be pretty easy to see or to find. So while I'm going to be screwing these, I can talk about the flat cable of the hard drive. When you plug, I mean, you could have installed the hard drive cable first and then install everything else. It's just, it's pretty tight, so it's kind of can be a bit tricky. But so when you install the cable, you're going to put a part of the flat cable underneath the assembly. So make sure it doesn't getting collided with. There's a relay, and the relay it's kind of very close, so it might give you a little bit more trouble when you're installing the flat cable. So just make sure that it's really put to the top, like close to the drive, bended, so you just have to install the, to align the connector inside. So you see the little relay there, that's the one that could be a bit of trouble. The battery, if you have a real-time clock battery, that'd be a great time to put it in there. Now, the power pillar. The power pillar is the one with the little notch in the back. So that is, if you look at the unit from the front, it should be on the left backside. So all these, so you see on the pillar there's a insert missing. I realized it later, and then I start the shot again with the insert, because I was screwing and there was no insert in it. These things are held with M4 screws. There's long ones and the short ones. So the short ones are used for the bottom part. So there's two for them. So you see, it's not very difficult. So a lot of screwing. All right. Now, on to the floppy and the SD pillars. So these two pillars are going to be temporarily just installed. So you see this, the width of this little middle part, it's really thin compared to the other one, because there's two pillars that look alike, but there's a bit the difference between two of them. So when you install the SD card, the important thing here, always make sure that the blue parts is on the outside. So like I said, for the time being, those two pillars will be just put in the base for the time being, because we're going to install the bar in between. So that bar is meant to hold the floppy in place. So you use the 2mm X, you install these flat 3mm M3 screws. And the reason why I'm not screwing those two pillars right away is because there's actually a screw underneath the support bar to screw to the floppy. So we'll handle. So you see the blue tab there. Really important that blue tab is the right direction. The screws, this is how it should be. And you're not going to be having problem having the right or wrong pillars, because only the right pillars have the right insert at the right place. So the floppy, same thing. It's going to be bent already, because before I pack these, I need to assemble them all. So I bent those things. Same thing, the blue tab is on the exterior. It's always the same rule. Just make sure the tab is really ejected, and then you insert the flat cable inside. Make sure it's really tapping the bottom of it, and then you push the pressure tab to make sure it's not going to go anywhere. So be careful there so you don't drop everything. Like I said, that material is very porous and it's easily breakable. So I broke 3 of them myself. Now, this is the 2mm. You'll need the black M2.5s, and they're meant to be used for, so there you go. So one of them is used to screw the bottom of the floppy so it doesn't go anywhere. You see? Insert dropping. So make sure your inserts are there, because if you start screwing and you feel that you're not screwing anything, it's because probably the insert was dropped somewhere along the way. Now we're going to screw the facing. There's 2 M2.5, black 2 M2.5. There's not a lot. There's, I think, only 3. So yeah, you have 2 screws to do in the front. Yeah, make sure you screw everything and hold everything. It's a bit precautious before all the panels are installed and everything has been screwed in properly. Alright, so floppy, flat cable, same thing. Notice where the blue tab is. It's on the other side, so inside it should not be there. In that case, I believe the blue tab is this way. Yeah, it's kind of difficult to install these things with one hand only. But I think this one is fine. Anyway, you get the picture. Now we're going to screw the base of the pillars, the 4 screws that we need to do this. Again, while I'm waiting, please protect your white resin. Of course, the black resin doesn't have any issue like this. I don't know about if painting is a good idea. I don't know. I've read that temperature and UVs are the worst enemy of resin for it to yellow over time. And one would think that it would take ages to happen, but no, it doesn't take ages. I mean, you would leave it in the sun in 1 month and you'll see how yellow it becomes. So yeah, it's very, very, I mean, even liquid resin has the same problem. If you do a 3D printing with resin, if you do transparent stuff or white stuff, you leave it too long, you're gonna have issues. Next up, guys, we have the support plate which holds the fan, and that setup will be good for most processors. If I was going to ship a 68060 model, I would probably put a smaller fan directly on the CPU. That plate would still be there, but it's mostly for stability and to be able for some to put a full ATX power supply. You'd still need the back plate to be the modified version to support it, but overall I think it's good to have a support plate like this in the Cube version. And in the Super I/O, there's actually a register to change the speed of the fan. So one could decide that if somebody has a very demanding application, then you could change the speed to get it to be a little bit more noisy, but you'll be able to make air move around the unit. And if one wants to install a real ATX power supply, then you'll have the chance to do this. And finally, we installed the last pillar, and it's pretty straightforward. So if you wanted to do an ATX power supply, then it would just need to be you would just need the back panel printed. Now I think we're on to just to finish screwing the last 2 screws. Yeah, sorry for the image. It's that shot was shot with a GoPro, and the top camera was my phone, or one of my phone. So now we're at the bumpers. So when we get to the bumpers, it's we're getting close to being finished. I mean, it just feels different with the bumpers. All right, so we're done with this. So the structure is in place. It's well supported. Now the side panels, there's not much to say. I'm covering the 3 first one you're going about installing, there's really no specific order. As you know, those are 3D printed with the Voron printer I have. Most of them usually give me pretty good results. Sometimes there might not be perfect, and there's a level of perfection I will tolerate till it becomes like, no, it's not great. By the way, yeah, you need like another tool, which I forgot to mention in the beginning. It's a 3/8X to screw that little screw. You could do it with a pair of pliers, I suppose. So there's a level, like I said, of quality level I will accept, because I cannot keep reprinting for it to be perfect. My quality level is definitely not so high when it's a back panel, because obviously it's not going to be seen so much. The front, usually I try to be a little bit more picky about. As far as I'm concerned, there's nothing special about the Pico power supply. Just make sure it's well inserted. Again, I was shooting it while I was holding it. I was, trying to push it with one hand, so without breaking everything. So in the back, it should be pretty straightforward. You insert it this way, and then here comes the screwing. So there's like a lot of small screws. They're screwed with a 1.5 millimeter. Like the 1.5, the holes for the screwdrivers is 1.5 millimeter. So yeah, overall, there's aside of doing the early on assembly of the floppy and everything, there's really nothing else to install aside of the panels. So it's not a very complicated assembly to be done, but we do save a lot of space while shipping. Is there anything else I could mention? Yeah, the 3D printed panels are could eventually be replaced, by the way, if you want to get yours, like if you want an acrylic to be laser cut or anything. I will eventually, when I have time, it's mostly about time, it's not about I don't want to do it, release the drawings for them. But one could decide to have like, hey, let's have a transparent panel, and just for the kick of it. And yeah, it's because when you release any drawings and everything, you need to make sure they're kosher and that they're great. So it takes a lot of time, and I figured that I would rather make those machine and ship them than try to release some mechanical drawings that we really don't need right now. So as you see, it's pretty straightforward, and we're on to the speaker panel. So there's not much about the speaker panel, about being a speaker panel. And so you just have to put the white connector into the white plug and the black connector into the black plug. There's not much to it. And while we saw the sockets for the sound chip, if you have any sound chip, early on would have been a great time to install them. And we finished the assembly with the front panel. There was a time where, I mean, it still exists. The idea to have a front panel that would be black, but then two speaker bezel that would be transparent, and then put some LEDs on it. There's actually a connector on the board that allows to put a strip of RGB. I've talked about it in the past, but this is something I'll come back probably next year to, if people want to put RGB LED strips underneath. So this is something that could be done. Finally, the cover. I don't have much to say. There's not much to say about the cover. Just firmly install it. You might have to give it a little bit of energy on each corner to make sure it's because of the pillars and the panels. There's a lot of attention on it. So yeah. Otherwise, it's pretty straightforward. Don't forget to increase your volume a little bit so you can hear things when you boot it up. But we're done. So finally you can enjoy it, and I hope you do, and I hope you enjoyed this commentary on how to assemble the GenX Cube. So for all of those who have bought a unit, thank you for your enormous patience. I hope you enjoyed the unit.